Hey guys, Noel here, and it is Tuesday, and we got a little bit of time on our hands, thought it'd be fun to do a comic book review for the comic book section of the Noel Comics YouTube channel. Recently, we reviewed The Dark Knight Strikes Again, the controversial and much maligned sequel to Frank Miller's iconic The Dark Knight Returns. Now, The Dark Knight Returns set the mold for the Tim Burton Batman movies, the mold that really shifted comic books in the United States to wanting to tell darker, grittier, more hard-boiled, cool stories, right? So this was a very iconic, groundbreaking, quintessential comic book. The Bash at the Beach 96, if you are a professional wrestling fan, familiar with that trope or analogy. The Dark Knight Strikes Again, is very criticized by fans for several reasons. One, a lot of people just don't like the artwork in this comic book. I think the artwork in this comic book is a mixed bag. There's some things in this comic book that are really not well done, like this picture right here. I don't know what is going on here. Superman has either got, I don't know. He's got no face and weird caveman hands. Like, that's not good at all. But, then again, there's some, cool artwork here at the same time, some cool layouts. Let me see if I can find something. For example, I like this page quite a bit. I think this is, a really cool Frank Miller page. This is an awesome Frank Miller page. But, the worst thing about this comic book is its treatment of Dick Grayson, a.k.a. Robin, who is a disgusting, weird freak that Batman takes pleasure in killing, which is really weird and off character for both Batman and Robin. So there you go. So this book, very, very criticized. People say this is like a Frank Miller Batman story that sucks, Now, what if I were to tell you that there was another Frank Miller Batman story that people say sucked? I think you know where I'm going with this. Only this time, it's not drawn by Frank Miller with his controversial, sometimes beautiful, sometimes ugly artwork. It's drawn by the Michelangelo of American comic books, the man, the myth, the legend, Jim Lee. That is right. Today, we are going to be reviewing All-Star Batman and Robin, the Batman year one of the dynamic duo Batman and Robin. I actually like this comic book series. I think this is a very unfairly vilified series, and I think I'll get into why people don't like it. There's legitimate reasons and illegitimate reasons. The artwork in this comic book is stunningly beautiful. Frank Miller's writing is almost like he's understood what people see as the Frank Miller brand, and he's very much leaning into that as he writes this comic book. So just a little bit of kind of background, both in terms of comic books and society, when Batman and Robin All-Star Edition were written. Jim Lee is as iconic as Frank Miller when it comes to the shift in aesthetics in comic books in the late 80s, early 90s. Jim Lee was very, very good at drawing sexy women and cool guys, right? Everything Jim Lee drew was a pinup. It was the just total ideal of men. Everything Psylocke did looked like it could have been ripped out of like a Victoria's Secret or a Penthouse or a Playboy magazine, as she's beating people up. And all the guys just look like Don Johnson on steroids. Just very cool guys, very sexy women. That was Jim Lee, and he was so good at drawing dynamic, cool ideals of men and women as they were understood in the late 80s and early 90s, right? That really kind of transformed comic books to, there is no stable comic book strip style paneling anymore. Everything is just jumping off the page and crazy light and shadow and cross-hatching everywhere, right? I mean, Rob Liefeld is a much more kind of raw version of Jim Lee, who I also like quite a bit, right? So, Jim Lee and Frank Miller like teaming up together is really a dream collaboration. And there's a lot of people that felt disappointed with the result. But I actually wasn't. I think this is a very interesting book. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on sociologically in the background at the time in which this comic book was written. So by 2005, 9/11 had already happened. So we had already kind of gotten this shift away from like Howard Stern, South Park, counterculture, Generation X, ennui angst, to now more like 1980s nostalgia and valorization of like machismo, to kind of get this like military spirit up and about socially as the Bush administration partakes on its Middle Eastern wars of aggression. So it's very much like wartime, and let's be like really tough about things in terms of the mass culture. At the same time, in the comic book industry, there was starting to be less and less of this Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld stuff. Like, that was really like, you know, Rob Liefeld, like the big extreme was like this is considered to be, I think incorrectly, the most garish manifestation of 1990s comic book aesthetics. Not to me, though. I think this is freaking awesome. Like this Rob Liefeld Captain America. But just the over-the-top male physiques, the over-the-top sexual poses of the women, you know, that ends up getting derided by a bunch of just, I think, sensitive people in art school, who then just start doing, I think, much more boring, conventional kind of panels and layouts that are, you know, technically sound but lack soul, you know, lack charisma, lack the pulse and the spirit of the industry, right? Frank Miller, while all this is going on, has become famous not just in comic books but in motion pictures. Sin City, Frank Miller's kind of gritty, hard-boiled detective noir, Dirty Harry, Tarantino-style comic book, has been adapted into movies, and you have like sexy Jessica Alba and stubbly Bruce Willis, you know. So you already have kind of a Jim Lee vibe, but in the Frank Miller style.
She hasn't spotted you yet. Turn around and walk out the door. Lead the creep outside. Get that Beretta away from him somehow. And kill him. You're just a horny ex-con watching an exotic dancer. In just a few seconds and she'll be safe. No, Nancy. Don't notice me. Don't recognize me. Anybody with high folks love. There's no time to explain. I made a terrible mistake. Put you in terrible danger. We need to get out of here right this second.
Whatever you say, Hardigan. Let me throw some clothes on.
And here I'd figured you'd forgotten all about me. Me and my dumb letters.
Kept me going. Kept me from killing myself. Hurry up, will you?
And then you also get like movies like 300, which valorize Western militarism against, you know, what are considered to be backward Persian cultures. So that's very much a post 9/11 movie. So, you know, that's kind of the background in which this comic book was written. And one of the things about The Dark Knight Strikes Again, some people have said that Frank Miller is trying to criticize like the sexualization of women in comic books, with some of his like over the top things like, you know, News in the Nude, or just like these kind of like, oh, look, it's the form of sexualization and of women in American comic books, right? So, but I kind of argued that I didn't think Frank Miller was criticizing that. I just think Frank Miller thought it was a thing. This is another really bad panel from this comic book right here. Anyway, and in this case, he's working with the guy, Mr. Like, I know how to draw sexy women in comic books, Jim Lee, right? Like, like, I'm just straight up drawing girls in lingerie and just cool guys and stuff like that, right? So in this case, like, Frank Miller is really, I think, telling Jim Lee to lean into that, and we're going to see a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of hypersexualization of women in this comic book, and Batman is just going to be a stubbly badass who's just beating people up all throughout this comic book. So it's almost like Frank Miller and Jim Lee know their brands, and they're just going to go 100 miles an hour as they portray what people understand to be the Jim Lee and Frank Miller brands in this comic book. Now, to modern kind of people in the 20-teens, 2020s who are reading this, this is just the most garish, off-putting, like, oh heavens to Betsy thing, clutching their pearls as they read this. But to me, I think this is a very interesting comic book. There is some legitimate criticism about Batman's characterization and how he behaves, and is this consistent with the character? And we certainly saw with like comic books like Watchmen, there being kind of like an ironic kind of anti-hero dimension to what people would consider to be ideal forms of a hero. And Frank Miller just, I think, kind of goes off the rails with that in The Dark Knight Strikes Again. We'll see how he handles that in the Dark Knight prequel, All-Star Batman and Robin, because I think it actually is a little more nuanced in this comic book and therefore a little more interesting. So without further ado, let's get down to reading this comic book. Sadly, it's only 10 issues and trails off without an ending, but let's see what it's all about. It is the Knoll Comics review of All-Star Batman and Robin by Jim Lee and Frank Miller. Here we go. Okay, so here we have it. We're going to read this digitally on my phone because I only have the first issue of All-Star Batman and Robin. But I did find this website that had the whole series up. So let's just kind of scroll through these pages and we'll just kind of comment on the story and what we see. So the first batch of issues, although the last, I think it was like starting at 8, 9, and 10, Frank Miller stopped doing this, but Frank Miller did his own variant covers for some of these. I guess it's not on number 1 either, but here we see Robin and here we see Batman, both drawn by Jim Lee in just very iconic Batman and Robin poses. And this right here, they're showing Robin as part of the Flying Graysons, and he's just all happy flying around, and, they've established his character. He's like a happy acrobatic kid. Here's Vicky Vale. I've definitely heard people talk about how Frank Miller is doing a lot of callbacks to the Tim Burton Batman movies. The Flying Graysons thing was in Batman Forever, so Tim Burton was just an advisor on that movie, not the head director. But Vicky Vale was the female protagonist in the first Tim Burton Batman, which was heavily influenced by Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. And here we see Vicky Vale in all her sexy glory here. And this right here is, I think, Frank Miller and Jim Lee really leaning into the fact that this is a man's comic book, and Vicky Vale is just this sassy, self-confident sex pot reporter who's very, very happy that she's going out with the Chad Giga Alpha Bruce Wayne here. But she definitely knows she's hot, and she's trying to figure out what she's trying to wear. She's drinking martinis in her high cut underwear, and just being just the embodiment of the, I guess, kind of femme fatale male ideal. Like Jim Lee is known, as we said in the start of this video, for drawing beautiful women. And Frank Miller was, said to have referenced that kind of thing in The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And so now we're really getting it balls to the wall with, Jim Lee, the most iconic early 90s artist, and Frank Miller, working together. So this is a man's comic book right here, and you see Vicky Vale and Alfred. Alfred's picking up Vicky Vale for her date with Bruce Wayne, and here we see Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne. Interesting drawing of Bruce Wayne here. He looks kind of like dark Superman, like kind of dark Clark Kent. This use of not even just perspective, but just drawing of the human form is fantastic by Jim Lee. Robin is really well drawn here as this kind of like impish tough kid. Bruce Wayne, just kind of the dark square jawed dude. Vicky Vale, the sexy socialite reporter, and Dick Grayson is just kind of doing his thing here. And Bruce Wayne is impressed, and he's saying how he's had his eye on Dick Grayson for a while. He's kind of scouting Dick Grayson to be his, helper in fighting crime. And so far we have very idealized, stylized versions of Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, and Vicky Vale. And so we're really operating in a world that is kind of got one foot in the Tim Burton Batman series and another foot in Frank Miller's Batman lore, and Jim Lee is just drawing it all masterfully. But right here, we see the Flying Graysons get assassinated right in front of Dick Grayson's eyes, and this here makes Bruce Wayne realize that now there's going to be a big parallel between him and Dick Grayson. And now, the same way that when Bruce Wayne saw his parents get killed, it put him on the path to be a vigilante crime fighter. He knows that now Dick Grayson is going to be on this path, and Bruce Wayne is going to put him on this path because he feels it's the path he should be on. And it's almost the path that he's destined to be on, according to Bruce Wayne. Now, some people don't like this portrayal of Bruce Wayne because they feel like he's kind of, abducting and kidnapping Dick Grayson against his will to become a crime fighter. And it even talks about how Batman kidnaps Dick Grayson to become his ward. Here you see Vicky Vale standing up to the corrupt cops in Gotham City as she's trying to, see what happened to Dick Grayson's parents. And, they're smacking her, but she's like kind of just getting back up and being sassy. And now she's telling Alfred to actually, she hijacks the car that Alfred was driving Bruce and Vicky in on the date to try to go track down these cops who have Dick Grayson, because she senses that these cops are dirty and something is wrong and she can't get information. And then all of a sudden Batman has this he's like he's not even just like a superhero. It's almost like he's like got otherworldly powers. He can control bats. And Batman just sends these swarm of bats at these dirty cops and just like rams through all their cars with his Batmobile. And then he just grabs Dick Grayson and he says, "You're now drafted into war." And this is where we're going to start to see like a very stark difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne. Batman is going to be kind of just a kind of crazy, dirty, hairy style vigilante crime fighter. And this is actually very much in line with some of the characterizations of Batman that Tim Burton has said. Like, oh, he's, if someone's crazy enough to dress up like a bat and be a vigilante, they're clearly mentally unstable. And Tim Burton, who always kind of, I think, thought of himself as mentally unstable, and made these Batman movies based off of Frank Miller style and lore. I think Frank Miller is kind of tapping into that, and you're getting kind of a I guess a boomerang effect or a resonance of Frank Miller and Tim Burton, and that's the end of the first issue right there. So we're going to go to issue number 2, and this right here, beautiful, beautiful Jim Lee cover. Batman just putting his chest out there, Dick Grayson just weeping. And this is where we get the Frank Miller variant cover right here, of just kind of blood-stained, Batman silhouette, and then Robin. Robin is definitely portrayed a lot more sympathetically than in any other Frank Miller Batman comic here. Dick Grayson, he's now, seeing, he's been, his parents just got blown away in front of him, and now Batman's just rescued him from these dirty cops, and he's like, you've been drafted into a war, and Dick Grayson is just kind of, contemplating everything that's going on. Look at that, really nice Batman reflection in his eyes, there's that signature early 90s hatching of Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld right there. Alfred is kind of a badass too. Alfred and Vicky have been kind of banged up from Batman just crashing the Batmobile into all those dirty cops that Vicky and Alfred were tailing here. And then Vicky Vale is, I guess, going to pass out from her injuries right here. And Batman is just kind of, being very rough with Robin right here. So, Batman here, when he's Batman, is just a very gruff, unhinged person. He is kind of the definition of kind of an anti-hero vigilante. And he's mean to Robin, but you see that he's mean to Robin to make him tough. And he doesn't really want Robin to kind of get in a mental state where he can soften up and become weakened by his parents' death. Batman wants to take Robin's parents' death and mold it into something that Robin can use to become a fighter. And here you see these really cool, stubbly pictures of Batman, and I don't know if we've passed the panel yet. Here it is. What are you, dense or retarded? I'm the goddamn Batman right here. So this is very over the top writing. And, again, I think Frank Miller is very mindful of this idea that, some people have kind of looked at the Batman-Robin relationship as kind of awkward or weird or kind of gay, because Robin, was running around wearing green underwear, and he was younger than Batman. But so Frank Miller and Tim Burton and when he was on Howard Stern was kind of alluding to that. Tim Burton didn't like Robin, didn't know what to do with Robin, And here we see Frank Miller has got Robin as basically being seen by Bruce Wayne / Batman as a potential crime fighter, and Batman is kind of like his coach or his sensei or his surrogate father who sees this kid and knows that he has to be hard on him to make him strong. And I'm not saying that that's healthy, but that is the picture that is shown here. And you do see times where Bruce Wayne is kind of seeing himself as Batman, and it's I'm going too far, and it's he's trying to walk this line between two identities. And, Batman in a lot of ways has lost his humanity from all his crime fighting and seeing his parents getting blown away. And it's Batman in this comic book really relishes his vigilantism, and Robin is just kind of shell-shocked by all of this. So here's Batman here. He's just driving the Batmobile through these crooked cops, blockades, and stuff like that. And this is just a lot of I'm a badass. I enjoy being a badass. it's very kind of Bronson-esque, like I'm gonna take the law into my own hands, and there's kind of a catharsis about that. And just here you see kind of Dick Grayson and Batman kind of having banter, and like Dick Grayson is just, kind of like, who the hell are you? What are you doing? Where am I? What is going on? And Batman's just like, what are you, stupid? I'm the goddamn Batman, and you're going to just start fighting crime here. And he's like, what are you, like, you're kind of weird, man. Like, what is, it's like Robin is just, he's like a teenager being critical of like an adult here. So you have that, kind of like Batman is kind of like, shut up, you snot-nosed freak kind of thing. I'm a tough badass, and I'm like, on the one hand, I'm kidnapping you and ruining your life, but on the other hand, I'm, like, you're just totally screwed, and I'm helping you fulfill your potential in terms of what I see, Like, there have been times when I was training, and some of the times, like, the teachers will be like, I'm not going to be nice to you now, Noel, like, you're a purple belt now, stop screwing around, like, so there is kind of a time when a male mentor has to be like kind of harsh and tell you you're screwing up, but it is very much a razor's edge you have to walk. And here you start seeing the birth of Robin here. And again, this is the most respect Frank Miller has ever treated Robin. And here we see Jim Lee and his iconic, like, open-legged chick kick right here. This is the sex pot Black Canary. And here you see the real difference between Frank Miller and his art style, which is very, unique, and some people might find crude, but, very evocative and attention-getting, versus the just, brilliance and beauty of Jim Lee and his command of the female form and the male form, and just their idealized versions if you're someone who came of age in the 80s and 90s. So here we get the introduction of Black Canary. A lot of the time Frank Miller, you saw in the Sin City clip that I showed earlier on, has these just sex pot women, and they're like, on the one hand, male fantasy, but on the other hand, they're very much able to be assertive and take matters into their own hands. And Jim Lee is just totally doing these spread eagle kicks right here that, he was very famous for doing in the 90s. Just, again, like, spread eagle is just the way that he knows what he's doing here. And his Black Canary is just beating up all these kind of crude guys who were hitting on her, because like one of them, I think, grabbed her ass or something like that. Love chunks. One of them's calling her love chunks. She like kicks him in the face. More of the beauty of the female form here. This right here, a lot of feminists will like bemoan the male gaze and things like that. But this, I think, is a perfect use of the male gaze to show female strength and get sympathy for women, like, from male readers, right? Men will be attracted to her and see her point of view, as opposed to like repulsing the male gaze and just turning off men because, this isn't for you, because like, it's almost like female beauty is something, negative, which, the irony is, I remember like in the Barbie movie, like hearing like originally like Amy Schumer was supposed to be cast as Barbie, and then they're like, actually, let's go with Margot Robbie. And I think that made all the difference in the world, because I don't even think women want to look like Amy Schumer. They do want to pretend they look like Margot Robbie. And that, I think, helped a lot of, women identify with and escape more into that movie where, they could both be victim and center of attention. Here, Black Canary is not a victim at all, but she is the center of attention. So this is a much stronger portrayal of women that happens to be drawn in a way that men will love and value, you know. So it's a very strong portrayal of a woman done in a very idealized way that a man will appreciate, because women can not only be strong and have interesting personalities, but they can also really be something to behold visually. Anyway, Black Canary beats up these guys, and she's talking about how she's inspired by Batman, and she's just her own, like, kind of female vigilante. And here's Batman just being a total stubbly, crazy Don Johnson badass. There are some, women that I've seen in my life who are just attracted to men like Batman here, where he's just like, he's like kind of well put together and confident, but just almost kind of mean. And that kind of cruelty is kind of viewed as like a form of strength and mystery, and, oh, he's better than me. And so, like, there is definitely something that, a lot of women find attractive with that type of chaotic form of a guy. Anyway, that's just kind of something that kind of stood out to me in my personal experiences reading this. You see Superman here. He's he's a real tight ass. And he sees that, Batman has kidnapped Robin, and now he's really pissed. And now we get to be continued. And there's always this weird rivalry between Batman and Superman in these comic books. Because it's almost like Batman resents Superman for being so strong, but Batman knows he's smarter than Superman, and so there's a real tension there. We see the Frank Miller cover, very interesting, and then we see the Jim Lee cover, real contrasting styles here. So, episode 4, Vicky Vale is in bad shape here. Batman is... It even says, Robin's even, like, saying that Batman's voice, he's trying to sound like Clint Eastwood, and that he's lost his mind, and this guy's just crazy. And Batman is taking Robin to the Batcave here, and he's gonna haze him here, because when Batman, Robin is just kind of in awe of all this cool stuff, and Batman's even like, pretty cool, huh, What do you say, Junior? Is that cool or what? Yeah, I guess it's okay. I mean, I've seen better, but I guess it's okay. Batman's like, I don't like this kid, not one bit, So Batman here is eventually, like, when Batman's parents died, according to Frank Miller, Batman really went into a very dark place and made himself strong by just being in this cave and eating rats and just kind of being in a very, like, I'm going to make myself brutally strong by putting myself in brutal situations. And he's throwing Robin into that. And Robin is just very much kind of still in a state of shock. And Batman knows he's still in a state of shock. And a lot of people don't like how Batman is acting here. But, I mean, if you look at him from the perspective of a vigilante who thinks he's doing the right thing by taking a kid who he sees is similar to him and then putting him on the same path that made Bruce Wayne / Batman strong, I mean, I think that is the motivation of the character there. Alfred is like, Vicky Vale is in horrible shape here. And Batman is going to say, get Superman to go get the best doctor in the world and just sling him over to the hospital. And he'll do whatever I say because I know his identity. And I'll out him as Clark Kent because I'm smart, Superman's like, damn you, Batman. That's right, Kent, you're busted. I know who you are, and you've got no damn idea who I am. I'm a detective, not mightier than the pounding surf. I can't leap tall buildings with a single bound, but I'm smart. One hell of a lot smarter than you'll ever be. And like, this is like really the Batman Superman dynamic in this comic book. The tension between those two, Golden Boy versus anti-hero. And, Batman is just seeing parallels between him and Dick Grayson, and how he remembers that Dick Grayson has got his parents' blood on his clothes, and Batman remembers how he had his parents' blood on his clothes. And so, like, Batman, he's trying to act inhumane and brutal, but his humanity keeps, like, poking in, so I don't know. It's just this is like the classic, like, he's a bad guy, but he's not really a bad guy. And like, this is exactly the kind of guy that a woman would go for. Like, he's seemingly a piece of shit, but like, oh, you see something good in him, and it's actually kind of exciting that he's a piece of shit, and that little bit of good in him makes him like interesting and dramatic, so yeah. Robin here is like, what am I supposed to do here? And Batman's like, just survive. And he's like, there's nothing here. And he's like, the food will present itself. And Robin's like, you kidnapped me and you're making me eat rats, like, this is so this is like where a lot of people see Batman as just not in keeping with his character. Superman, this is a hilarious and cool panel. Like, Superman just gets the best surgeon in the world, grabs him in his car, and just runs him over to Vicky Vale. Batman is now just going crazy trying to find out who killed Robin's parents. And Alfred gives Dick Grayson some burgers and fries because he's like, you didn't ask for this. I'm going to help you out. And Batman's actually pissed at Alfred. And Alfred's like, you chose to live like this. This kid didn't, And so, like, Batman and Alfred are having a back and forth. So this is the exchange, like, the boy, okay, this is an interesting panel here, right? Robin's like, a bacon cheeseburger with fries, I'm in heaven. I guess there must be somebody around here that notices me. And Batman's like, what the hell are you doing, Alfred? And Alfred's like, that boy will not be reduced to eating rats, sir. And Bruce is like, I was. And then he's like, you chose your time below, living like a rat yourself. You chose this life. And Batman's like, and it has chosen him. And Alfred's like, sir, I'm your butler, I'm your aide, I'm your medic, but I'm not your slave, And, Batman just kind of storms off because this is a really interesting picture of Batman because Jim Lee is drawing him in the Frank Miller style here. And so, like, Alfred kind of put Batman in his place, and Batman's just kind of, like, angrily walking off. Number 5. Really, really cool cover here. Batman with stubble looks awesome. Okay, this is where we start getting the Wonder Woman stuff. This is where we start getting the Dark Knight Strikes Again type stuff. We got the Justice League. We have Jim Lee masterfully drawing Wonder Woman. And this is where you see the big rivalry between Superman and Wonder Woman, where they have all this, like, kind of sexual tension. And, here they are making out after they have this, like, violent argument. And, like, Wonder Woman's, like, telling him off. And Superman at a certain point is just like, fuck you, lady. And he, like, kind of knocks her down with his foot. Like, makes, like, an earthquake. And Wonder Woman, like, and him just start making out. And the Justice League here is basically deciding what to do with Batman because he's a superhero, but he kidnapped Robin. And they're like, he's, like, out of control. And so Green Lantern is like, let me go talk to him. Wonder Woman is just like, we should kill Batman. And Green Lantern's like, no, let me talk to him. And Superman kind of put her in her place, so she like storms off after she makes out with Superman, because Superman's such a freaking stud, right? You know, right? So Batman is relishing his life as a vigilante here, and he's just like beating up anyone he can find who like killed Robin's parents. It's like, it's really interesting because even though he is like torturing Robin, you could think, or like he's really kind of brutally training him, you can see he really does care about him, and he's like doing all this stuff kind of outside of Robin's purview where he's trying to avenge his parents for him. Just Batman just going through Gotham's seamy underbelly here, kind of Sin City style. Really freaking cool panel of lightning crackling behind vigilante Batman. Batman does smile a lot in this comic with his 5 o'clock shadow as he relishes crime fighting. Jim Lee has made Alfred like a really cool badass in this comic. Alfred is like buff and can fight in this comic book. Very, very cool. He's like training and stuff like that, you know. Alfred can totally hold his own. Robin is learning his way around the Batcave and finds a giant axe. And this is going to get interesting here. On to issue 6. We get the introduction of Batgirl along with Black Canary and Batman and Robin. Frank Miller drawing of Batgirl. Again, very, you know, you could argue that it's kind of a crude style, but it's his style and it's an interesting style. Definitely not, in my opinion, as aesthetically pleasing as Jim Lee. But it definitely, there is a method to his madness here. More beautiful artwork from Jim Lee, and now as Batman is just trying to randomly just interrogate and do his kind of vigilante detective work, Black Canary is now on the scene. And right here we get Barbara Gordon. Now, Barbara Gordon is a lot like Carrie Kelly from The Dark Knight Returns, the girl Robin. She's like a 15-year-old crime fighter, you know, pretty girl vigilante, like the kind of the sexy girl version of Robin, which is what Carrie Kelly was kind of portrayed as in the Dark Knight Returns. Now you're getting that with Barbara Gordon in All-Star Batman and Robin. Jim Gordon has an alcoholic wife in this comic, and he's constantly talking to someone else on the phone. Some people have said that, like, oh, he's, like, cheating on his wife or something, but there's this other lady named Sarah who he's just constantly spilling his guts to. I love that there's a Dark Knight Returns poster in Barbara Gordon's room. That's actually really cool. Jim Lee's so awesome at drawing. Jimmy Olsen has a crush on Vicky Vale. That is very cool in this comic. And he like goes to give Vicky Vale flowers, and all these other people have given her flowers. So Vicky Vale is changing her clothes in front of Jimmy Olsen, and he's just being tortured by her sexiness right here. Meanwhile, the Black Canary is just also super sexy and beating up people. And she gets herself into trouble. Batman ends up also seeing what's going on with her as he's doing his kind of parallel vigilante work. And he helps her out. And we're going to be continued here as the plot thickens. Very, very, very cool cover here. This is another interesting Frank Miller cover. The gnarled Frank Miller Batman, as opposed to the super idealized Jim Lee Batman and Black Canary. Black Canary looking really just great design here. So Batman's just beating the crap out of these guys, helping Black Canary, a fellow vigilante. Dynamic angles, perspective, great fight scenes, just glossy use of light here. Black Canary is just totally enamored with Batman, and she's like, has anyone ever told you you're really hot? And he's like, not for the last few days, no. She's like, consider yourself told. And then him and Black Canary end up having sex in the pounding rain. So, again, this is a man's comic here. So, this is really nice. Look at this paneling. It's just great. I mean, really, really good stuff here. Love how those fishnets, like, just, man, Jim Lee is so good at just drawing women and cool guys, and now they're done here. So I think Batman's gonna even Jim Lee's like kind of headshot panels are just so expressive. Batman's gonna give Black Canary a ride home here. She's smoking, and he's also like, will you shut up? And just like talking his ear off, So you just kind of get these like, again, like this, like Frank Miller loves that kind of contrast of the pretty girl and the gruff guy. Dick Grayson is now starting to eat rats, and Batman actually finds the guy who killed Dick Grayson's parents. He throws him down in front of Dick Grayson, who's wielding an axe. And Batman says, do you want to avenge your parents' death or be a detective? And Dick Grayson has to make a choice here. Is he going to kill this guy? And Dick Grayson's like, no, I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to find out why you killed my parents, and I'm going to just beat you into a pulp. And this is what Batman would have done. So Batman now sees the potential in Dick Grayson being increasingly fulfilled. And we find out that the Joker was behind the murder of Dick Grayson's parents. This sadly never gets resolved because there is no ending to this comic book. It just kind of trails off. We're on issue 8 of 10. This is the introduction of the Joker. This is also where we now start getting other artists doing the variant covers, which is kind of disappointing. But this idea of having Batman's profile in the Joker's face is a very cool optical illusion here. We get the introduction of the Joker, who has just had sex with a lawyer, and she's kind of taken with the Joker, and Joker, really tells her why it's a bad idea to be attracted to abusive men, because he kills her right here, and he's like, dispose of the body. And in The Dark Knight Returns, there was this topless girl with swastika pasties, and so she's in this comic too. She's a bad guy, obviously. Back to the Batcave here. Batman and Robin are starting to track the origin of, the murder of Dick Grayson's parents. And Batman is just like, you have to come up with a superhero costume and identity. And Batman's like, starts calling him Boy Wonder. And Robin's like, Boy Wonder? And Batman's like, so come up with something better, kid. I'm not made out of time. And it's about time you did something around here. He's like, okay, I'll work on it. First, answer me a question. And Batman's like, sure, kid, fire away. He's like, what's the deal with this big robot T-Rex? I mean, it's cool, but what the hell is that? And Batman's like, shut up and get to work on your costume. Get yourself a damn mask, So I do like this banter with Batman and Robin. They have like a really cool dynamic there. That robot T-Rex comes back in The Dark Knight Strikes Again. See, this is like so much better than The Dark Knight Strikes Again, though. Because Batman and Robin actually have like a good rapport, even though you could view it as like an abusive father. You could also look at it as, someone who cares, trying to harden their protege, And so Batman is going to run into the Green Lantern after he basically, tortures this guy who kills Robin's parents to get information out of him. Batman relishes his vigilantism again. Some may say that is out of character for Batman, who traditionally is portrayed with much more emotional composure. Again, this is Frank Miller, I think, really leaning into the Frank Miller tropes. Dick Grayson likes Robin Hood. So originally he's going to come up with a name for himself, The Hood. And Batman's not going to like that because you can pull a hood over, your eyes. So Batman's like, you're going to call yourself Robin and not The Hood. But Batman runs into Green Lantern and they start having some banter here. And Green Lantern wants to start talking to Batman, and they're going to set up another meeting where they can talk even more. And here we get the introduction of Catwoman. And Frank Miller always has this thing where Joker and Catwoman flirt, and then the Joker beats up and ties up Catwoman. Nice shot, kid. And this is Robin's first costume, and like I said, Batman doesn't like the hood. And he's like, lose the hood, you're Robin. And Robin's like, I can't do anything right around this guy. So you see Robin increasingly try to please Batman, he looks up to him like an older brother. It's it's interesting because if Batman, obviously if I were Batman, I would be nowhere nearly as brutal in my pedagogical style. But, this is the character of Batman as Frank Miller portrays him. So everything is just kind of dysfunctional and violent, but ultimately well-intentioned. This is another beautiful cover by Jim Lee. And I don't really like this cover. This is a really iconic issue. This is, I think, I don't like that. Personally, this is not my style. I think it's really ugly. And this is incredibly beautiful. This is not Frank Miller. It's some other guy. Batman paints himself totally yellow, lures the Green Lantern into an apartment that Robin has painted completely yellow, right? As Batman and Green Lantern start having, more heated conversation, the Green Lantern starts beating up Batman, and Batman's just still kind of there. And Batman has a cover story that he didn't actually kidnap Dick Grayson, and Dick Grayson is playing along. And Green Lantern, the discussion just keeps getting heated with him and Batman, and eventually Robin steals his ring to try to make it so he can't do anything. And Robin and Green Lantern start getting into it with Robin having his ring. Robin is so pissed off from all the training and trauma that he punches, he does a karate chop to Green Lantern's throat, and Batman's like, oh shit, and he just throws Robin down. He's like, you're gonna kill, Robin's like, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? And Batman's like, you're gonna, Batman is trying to save Green Lantern's life here, because he created this situation where the Green Lantern is now in mortal danger. Robin was so good with all the training he had been doing and Batman had been doing with him that now he's almost killed Green Lantern, and now Batman's got to once again Tarantino style perform an emergency tracheotomy on the Green Lantern. So this is just totally nuts writing here, which I think is really in keeping with Frank Miller's style. Batman and Robin going away together in the hard rain that washes the yellow paint off of them. And one of the reasons Batman understands that Robin almost killed Green Lantern is because he never had time to grieve his parents. And Batman remembers when he was like that too. So he takes Robin to his parents' grave, and they just grieve together over their dead parents because they both experienced the same loss and, the same misery and things like that. And, it's really interesting here, because Batman has forcibly put Robin on this path, but Robin was in danger, so it's like if Batman had just left Robin to himself, he was going to just get abducted by these like crooked cops that are in league with the Joker. So Batman has kind of done what he thinks is best, which, who knows if that's actually the case. But Robin definitely has an affinity for Batman and, what he stands for. So there is this very kind of contentious and complex teacher-protege relationship. So this is, I think, the most powerful scene in the comic where both this Batman and Robin just break down, and in the graveyard where their parents are, just, like Frank Miller is really good at writing male stoicism, because guys, like, they hold all this stuff in, and, sometimes it just piles up, and it's very hard to show emotion. And like, this is like manly tears right here. Final issue. This is sadly the series going out with a whimper rather than a bang. Weird variant cover. I'm not really a fan of this style of artwork here. I am a fan of this. Okay. This is all about Jim Gordon and just kind of how Barbara Gordon, Jim Gordon finds Catwoman all beaten up. She says, let Batman know where I am. Batman gets information of where Catwoman is, and we see Batman and Robin track down Catwoman. They're beating up bad guys together. Batman isn't really impressed with how good Robin has gotten here. Robin is just a smart-ass teenager. Batman is like just his older brother, father, kind of badass, grizzled, hard-boiled vigilante detective. Finds Catwoman all beaten up from the Joker. Barbara Gordon is fighting crime on a skateboard here, just being a pretty fun girl, beating up bad guys. Black Canary is just walking sex, beating up men, so that's always fun. I love that figure and her fishnets. That is just so cool. Black Canary also like having fun being a vigilante. Jim Gordon, also hard-boiled detective, sucking down a cigarette here. Barbara is going to get herself arrested. And Jim Gordon's wife is dying from alcohol poisoning. And she's going to pull through, but she's like basically OD'd on alcohol. And this is, I think, a very cool scene. So Jim Gordon finds out that Barbara Gordon, his daughter, Batgirl, has been running around as a vigilante behind his back, and he's like really pissed at her, but he's also really impressed that she takes total responsibility for her actions. This is a woman that takes accountability and does not just shift the blame to external factors or something else. She's just totally like, I knew what I was doing. I knew it was wrong. This is why I thought it was right, And he's basically like, you're in a shit ton of trouble, but I respect you as a person in terms of how you handled this, is his response. And she says, you should call Sarah, this girl that he's been spilling his guts out to. And this is literally the end of the series right here. So, it's really, really unfortunate that this series ends with no closure, because I don't know. I find this series to be incredibly interesting, really well drawn, and it is truly a collaboration between Frank Miller and Jim Lee. So A lot of people hate this. I went into this like having just finished The Dark Knight Strikes Again and not really liking that comic book. But I went into here not knowing what I would think, knowing that I would love Jim Lee's artwork, but Frank Miller could be hit or miss. And I really, really enjoyed this comic book series from start to finish. And I was really sad that there was no closure to it. I know Frank Miller and Jim Lee have talked about finishing this series. I really hated the way that Frank Miller did the ending of the relationship with Batman and Robin in The Dark Knight Strikes Again. It would be nice if they were to somehow do something different. This is, I think, good Frank Miller writing of Robin, an interesting characterization of Batman, and just a really cool, hard-boiled, gritty version of the Batman lore. And Jim Lee drawing it is the icing on the cake. So this is All-Star Batman and Robin. I'm one of the few people that actually like this series, and I encourage you to check it out for yourself. Until next time, guys, my name is Noel. You take care, and I'll see you later on the Noel Comics YouTube channel. Bye-bye.